Captain Emma stood at the front of the conference room aboard the massive intergalactic trading station, her heart pounding in her chest. Her crew was behind her, all of them wearing nervous smiles as they prepared for their first official meeting with the Scythian delegation. The Scythians were an alien species known across the galaxy for their cold, calculating nature. Their technology was decades ahead of humanity's, and their diplomatic practices were as sharp and unforgiving as their military strategies. The pressure was on. Emma had spent months preparing for this moment. As the leader of humanity's first interspecies diplomatic mission, she knew that their success depended on this one meeting. Earth had to make a good first impression. She wasn't just representing her ship or her crew. She was representing an entire planet. This was more than just diplomacy. It was a matter of survival. The Scythians were known to value strength, and humans were notorious for their politeness. Emma had read countless reports, listened to advisors, and even consulted with the top diplomatic experts back on Earth. The consensus was clear. The Scythians respected strength and disdained weakness, but Emma was determined to do things differently. What if politeness, kindness, and sincerity could win over the Scythians? Perhaps showing respect, humility, and civility could set humans apart from the other, more aggressive species in the galaxy. With that thought in mind, Emma flashed a smile at her crew and gave them a silent signal. They straightened their posture and prepared to greet the Scythians. The doors slid open with a hiss, and in walked the Scythian delegation. They were tall, towering over the humans with their sleek, elongated bodies and sharp, angular features. Their skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, and their eyes glowed with an eerie, almost hypnotic light. They moved with an unsettling grace, as if each step had been calculated down to the millisecond. Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding out her hand in a gesture of peace. "Welcome to Earth's first diplomatic envoy," she said, her voice steady but full of warmth. "We are honored to meet you." The Scythian leader, whose name Emma had memorized from the briefing, simply stared at her outstretched hand. For a moment, the room was deathly silent. Emma's smile began to feel a little strained as the seconds stretched on. Finally, the leader raised one long, bony hand, slowly accepting Emma's gesture. The cold touch sent a shiver down her spine. "You are too kind," the Scythian leader said, its voice low and gravelly. It didn't sound pleased. It didn't sound anything at all. It was just a statement. Emma nodded, her smile unwavering. "We believe in the power of kindness and understanding, and we hope this meeting will mark the beginning of a new, mutually beneficial relationship." The Scythian's glowing eyes flickered for a split second, but it didn't respond. It was as if Emma's words hadn't even registered. She could feel the weight of its gaze as the other members of the delegation scanned the room, sizing up her crew, clearly unimpressed. Emma motioned for her crew to sit, and they took their places around the sleek, circular table. The Scythians didn't sit. They stood, their towering forms casting a long shadow over the humans. Emma's crew exchanged nervous glances but remained quiet. They had rehearsed their speeches, practiced their etiquette, but now that the Scythians were actually here, it felt different. Every word Emma spoke seemed to bounce off the walls, absorbed by the cold, indifferent eyes of the aliens. "Please, allow us to offer you refreshments," Emma said, her voice still polite, but now laced with an underlying edge of tension. She gestured toward the nearby food stations, where delicacies from Earth's best chefs were prepared. Fresh fruits, fine teas, and even a selection of Earth's famous chocolates were laid out in neat rows. She smiled again, waiting for a response. The Scythians didn't move. "Perhaps you would prefer something more familiar," Emma added quickly, trying to offer a different option. She was determined to please them, to show them that humans weren't just another weak species in the galaxy. They were civilized, refined, and ready to engage in a meaningful exchange. Finally, the Scythian leader spoke again, but this time, its tone was colder than before. "You offer too much. Why?" The simple question sent a chill through Emma's spine. She hadn't anticipated this response. Why? She had no idea. Was her politeness a mistake? Was her gesture of peace perceived as weakness? "We believe in creating goodwill," Emma said, choosing her words carefully. "We understand that we are a young species in the grand scheme of things, and we want to make our best impression. We are eager to learn and grow, and we hope you'll see that." There was another long pause. Emma could feel her own uncertainty creeping in. The Scythians were unmoved, unreadable. The aliens didn't smile, didn't show any sign of pleasure. Instead, they just observed, their piercing eyes never leaving the humans. "You beg," the Scythian leader finally said, its voice as cold as ice. "Humans beg for peace, beg for acceptance. You think you can offer kindness to win us over." The words stung, but Emma held her ground. "We don't beg. We offer friendship." The Scythian leader leaned forward, its eyes narrowing. "You offer too much, human. And for what? Do you think we will see your kindness as strength?" Emma's mind raced. Was it too much? Had they misjudged the situation? She couldn't afford to make a mistake now. The fate of Earth's future could depend on this moment. As the Scythians stood silently, Emma realized with growing dread that they weren't impressed. In fact, they were growing more uncomfortable. Something was wrong. Her politeness was not working as expected. The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing second. Was kindness really the answer? Or had it just led humanity into a deadly trap? "Captain," Emma stood frozen for a moment as the weight of the alien leader's words sank in. "You offer too much," it had said, its voice carrying an unsettling calm that made the air in the room feel thick. Emma's polite smile faltered for just a second before she quickly regained composure. Her crew watched her with wide eyes, each member silently praying that the tension in the room wouldn't explode. But as the seconds stretched, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were slipping further from their goal. Emma quickly scanned the faces of the Scythian delegation. They stood tall and unmoving, as if they were judging every word that came out of her mouth, measuring the sincerity of her every gesture. She had read about the Scythians. Their species was known for being merciless in their dealings, their eyes unblinking as they assessed whether a species had the strength to thrive or was destined to perish. And right now, Emma felt like they were being weighed and found wanting. She had expected to face challenges in these first moments of contact, but nothing had prepared her for how deeply her kindness had been misinterpreted. Taking a deep breath, she attempted to salvage the situation. "We do not wish to overwhelm you," she said, her voice steady, "but we want to show you that Earth is ready to join the galactic community." She motioned for her crew to continue with the presentation, hoping the displays of humanity's achievements and values would help shift the mood. But as her team began to share their plans for future cooperation, she noticed that Scythians still remained silent, their piercing gazes fixed on every movement, every word. The longer the silence stretched, the more it felt like a judgment. Each kind gesture, each overly courteous remark now seemed like a mistake. Emma realized with a creeping unease that the Scythians weren't moved by what humanity had to offer. They were watching for something else. Strength, not kindness, was what they valued. She had tried to extend an olive branch, but it felt like the branch had been snapped in two. The alien leader took a step forward, and Emma instinctively took a half step back, as though the space between them had grown uncomfortably wide. "Your offers are meaningless," it said, its voice now colder than before. "What do you seek from us, human? Do you think your pleasantries will earn you a place in our ranks?" The words struck like a blow. Emma's heart raced, and she quickly glanced at her crew for guidance, but they were just as confused, unsure how to respond to the aliens' pointed accusations. "Respect," Emma said, her voice quieter now, as though the room had become suddenly smaller. "We wish to show you that humanity is capable of respecting other cultures, that we are worthy of standing alongside other great civilizations." She was trying to maintain her composure, but she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, her mind racing for the next words to say. She wasn't sure if it was desperation or determination that drove her forward now. The Scythians hadn't even blinked. The alien leader glanced at its subordinates, and for the briefest moment, Emma could swear she saw a flicker of amusement in their eyes, something that felt all too familiar. It was the kind of look you might give a child who tried too hard to please, a look that was both pitying and condescending. "You humans," the leader said, its voice taking on a strange, almost mocking tone. "You give too much, and for what? Do you think we will be impressed by your offerings? Your kindness will not save you in the end." The words echoed in the room, reverberating in Emma's chest. She felt a pang of regret. Perhaps this approach had been all wrong. Perhaps their politeness had made them appear weak, naive even, to beings who were far beyond their understanding. The weight of the mistake settled heavily in her stomach, but she couldn't let it show. Not now. Not when the whole of Earth was depending on this. Without realizing it, she had taken another step back, instinctively creating more space between herself and that Scythian leader. The tension was unbearable now, thick enough that it almost seemed to press against the walls. Emma's mind raced for another way to salvage the situation, but the words she needed didn't come. All she could hear was the steady pulse of her heartbeat in her ears, and the ever-watchful gaze of the aliens around her, silently judging, silently waiting. The quiet was deafening. The polite exchange that she had hoped would create the foundation for a strong relationship with the Scythians now felt like a distant dream. The aliens seemed unmoved by anything she had said. They weren't here for pleasantries. They weren't interested in kindness. As the moments ticked by, Emma knew in her gut that she had made a fatal error. The Scythians were not swayed by human kindness. They were swayed by power. And at this moment, it seemed that humanity had nothing to offer but weak, desperate gestures. The tension in the room thickened as Captain Emma stood frozen, her mind racing. The alien leader's chilling words echoed in her head. "You offer too much." It was clear now that every gesture of goodwill, every polite offering had been a mistake. What was meant to show respect had only invited ridicule, and Emma could feel the room closing in around her. The Scythians hadn't just rejected her attempts at diplomacy. They seemed to find them laughable. In their eyes, humanity's politeness was a weakness, something to be exploited. The silence was unbearable. Emma fought the urge to apologize again, to smooth over the awkwardness, but she knew that doing so would only make things worse. Her crew, too, had fallen silent, unsure of what to do next. They had been trained for situations like this, but nothing had prepared them for a species that viewed kindness as a fatal flaw. What had started as a promising mission of peace was quickly descending into a nightmare. One of the Scythian delegates, taller than the others, with sharp, almost predatory features, stepped forward. His voice, when it came, was low and icy. "You humans are too eager to please," he said. "You think we will respect your gifts. Your words. You misunderstand us, Captain." Emma clenched her fists, trying to maintain her composure. This wasn't how she had imagined this encounter would go. She had expected challenges, but she had never anticipated the Scythians would see politeness as a form of weakness, something beneath their dignity. "We are not trying to impress you," Emma said, her voice firm, despite the knot of fear tightening in her stomach. "We are offering you a partnership, a chance to work together for the benefit of both our species, to build a future of peace." The Scythian delegate stared at her for a long moment, and then, almost imperceptibly, his lips curled into a sneer. "Peace? Your kind speaks of peace, yet you offer us nothing but your desperate need for approval. You beg for our cooperation, and in doing so, you show your true nature." Emma's chest tightened. The alien's words hit harder than she had anticipated. They had been too polite, too eager to please. She had thought kindness would bridge the gap between their worlds. But now it seemed like they had opened a door to a trap. Another Scythian, smaller and more slender than the first, raised a hand. "Do you think we will accept your pleas and bow to your politeness?" The alien asked, its voice dripping with disdain. "What do you think we are? Fools." Emma opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her mind was racing, trying to find a way to salvage the situation, but the words felt hollow. Her crew, too, looked lost. They had been expecting a diplomatic exchange, a meaningful conversation. They hadn't been prepared for an encounter like this, one where kindness was seen as an insult, not a strength. Then, without warning, the Scythian leader raised a hand, and the room went dead silent. "Enough," it said, its voice carrying a weight that immediately stilled everyone. The air felt heavier now, thick with the sense of danger. Emma's heart skipped a beat as the leader's gaze shifted toward her, its eyes glowing faintly with a predatory light. "You misunderstand us, Captain. We do not seek peace with the weak." A chill ran down Emma's spine. She had made a fatal mistake. The Scythians didn't want peace with humanity. They wanted to test humanity. They wanted to see if humans were strong enough to be worthy of their attention. And in Emma's desperate need to make the right impression, she had only proven them right. Humans were too weak, too polite. Her hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists, steeling herself for whatever came next. "We are not weak," she said, though the words felt hollow even to her. "We." But before she could finish, the Scythian leader interrupted her again, its voice colder now. "You are not worthy of our time, Captain. Your kind is a joke. We do not wish for your friendship. We came here only to see if you were strong enough to survive in our galaxy, and I see now that you are not." A shiver of dread ran through Emma as she realized the full extent of their situation. They weren't here to form an alliance. The Scythians had come as a test, one that humanity was failing miserably. Emma could feel the eyes of her crew on her, all of them hoping for a miracle. But deep down, she knew the truth. Humanity had been too polite, too eager to please, and now they were paying the price. The room was silent for a long time, but it felt as though every second stretched on forever. The Scythians stood there, their eyes cold and calculating, while the humans remained frozen, paralyzed by the realization of their failure. Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. She couldn't give up, not yet, but it was becoming clear that politeness would not save them. They needed something more than just good intentions. They needed strength, and they needed to find it fast. The silence that followed was suffocating. The Scythians towered over them, their cold, calculating gazes never wavering. Emma's heart raced as the weight of their words settled into the pit of her stomach. The Scythians were no longer just uninterested. They were dismissive, even contemptuous. They had come to test humanity, and it was becoming clear that humanity had failed that test. Captain Emma's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling as the room seemed to close in around her. She had thought that showing kindness, that offering peace, would open the door to cooperation with these powerful beings. She had believed that politeness would be seen as strength, that the humility of humans could bridge the divide between their worlds. But now she realized how wrong she had been. The Scythian leader stepped closer, its metallic eyes gleaming with a hint of malice. "You were right to be polite, Captain, but you have only proved that you are weak. You do not belong here, in the same arena as the true powers of the galaxy." Emma's chest tightened, the sting of those words sinking deep into her bones. "We don't wish to be like you," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "We don't want to conquer or destroy. We only want to learn. We only want peace." The leader's laugh was soft but cruel. "Peace? You think you can survive in this galaxy with peace alone?" The alien's voice was full of disdain, as if the very concept of peace was laughable. "No one survives here by being weak. You must prove yourselves, not with words, but with power." The room felt colder with every word. Emma's mind raced, her thoughts colliding in a whirlwind. She had prepared for diplomacy, for discussions, for negotiations. She had not prepared for this, for the Scythians to openly mock her, to tear apart everything she had worked for. She had come here believing that humanity's greatest asset was its compassion, its ability to form bonds and build relationships. But the Scythians had rejected that notion entirely. The polite gestures, the offerings of goodwill, had all been seen as attempts to placate, to grovel. She had given too much, and in doing so, had shown nothing but weakness. "We are not afraid to fight," Emma said, more forcefully now. "If that's what you want. If you need to see our strength, we'll show you." The words felt foreign on her tongue. She had always believed in diplomacy, in peaceful resolution. But in that moment, standing in the face of alien superiority, something shifted inside her. Maybe humanity wasn't ready to win over the Scythians with politeness. Maybe they had to show them something else. The Scythian leader raised an eyebrow, intrigued but still mocking. "You would fight us?" it asked, its voice dripping with skepticism. "With what? Your weak ships. Your primitive weapons." Emma's heart raced, but she held her ground. "We may not have the technology you do, but we have something you don't. The will to fight for what we believe in. We will defend our planet, our people, and our right to exist." For the first time, Emma saw a flicker of something in the Scythian leader's eyes. Curiosity, perhaps even a hint of respect. The other Scythians, who had been standing in complete silence, now shifted slightly, their gazes flickering between each other and the humans. Emma's words had struck a chord, but was it enough? "We will see," the leader said cryptically, its voice like ice. "We will see if your will is enough to survive. The galaxy does not take kindly to the weak, but we shall give you one final test." Emma felt a wave of dread wash over her. The test. What did that mean? Was it another challenge? Something even worse than what they had already endured? "What is your test?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The Scythian leader leaned in, its gaze piercing. "You will prove your strength by making the choice," it said, its voice low and dangerous. "You can surrender now, admit your inferiority, and perhaps we will leave you to your insignificant existence, or you can fight. Fight us and prove that you are worth our time." Emma swallowed hard. This wasn't a test of diplomacy. This wasn't a test of kindness. This was a test of survival. The Scythians were offering her an ultimatum, and there was no easy answer. If she surrendered, they would return to their ships, perhaps never to return again. But if she fought, humanity would face an enemy they were not ready for. Her mind raced. There was no way humanity could win a war with the Scythians, not in their current state. But if she surrendered, it would mean that humanity would forever be at the mercy of these ruthless beings. It would mean that Earth's future was sealed by their rejection. The thought of that made her blood run cold. "We will fight," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "We will never surrender." The Scythian leader's lips twitched into what could only be described as a smile. It was cruel, calculating, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Very well. We shall see if your human will is enough." With that, the Scythians turned and began to walk away. Their departure was swift and deliberate, leaving Emma and her crew standing in stunned silence. The air in the room felt thinner now, as if the very oxygen had been drained away. "What now?" one of her crew members whispered, his voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Emma looked at the rest of her team, each face filled with uncertainty. She didn't have the answers. She didn't know what was coming next. But one thing was certain. The Scythians weren't going to just let them walk away. Humanity had passed the point of no return. Now they had to face the consequences of their choices. The weight of their decision hung in the air like a storm cloud, oppressive and inevitable. Captain Emma could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she stared at the empty space where the Scythians had been moments ago. Her mind was still reeling from their ultimatum, but one thing was clear. The path ahead was dark, and there was no turning back. Her crew stood around her, equally silent, their faces a mix of fear, uncertainty, and determination. Emma could see the doubt in their eyes, the silent question that everyone was asking themselves. Is humanity truly ready for what's coming? We made our choice, Emma said finally, her voice breaking the suffocating silence. And now we live with it. Her words, simple as they were, had an effect. The crew, still shaken, seemed to draw strength from them. One by one, their postures straightened, and the uncertainty in their eyes slowly began to fade, replaced by a hard resolve. They were in this together, and they would face whatever came next as a unit. But Emma knew that the hardest part wasn't over. Humanity had never faced anything like the Xethians, and their fleet was only a glimpse of the kind of power they wielded. It wasn't just a war they had signed up for. It was a fight for survival, and that would take everything they had. "Prepare the ship," she ordered. "We have to get back to Earth." And warned them, "The Xethians won't give us a second chance." The crew scattered, moving quickly to their assigned stations, and Emma was left alone in the command center. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the console in front of her. She couldn't afford to break now. Not in front of them. Not in front of humanity. The Xethians were a test, but they weren't the only test that lay ahead. Earth had to be ready. The entire planet's future rested on the next steps they took, and Emma was determined not to let her people go down without a fight. As the crew worked to prepare for the return journey, Emma's mind raced. She thought about the Scythians' words, "You must prove yourselves, not with words, but with power." What could that power be? What did the Scythians expect? And how could they possibly hope to survive against a species that had already made it clear that they didn't just want to dominate, they wanted to destroy? She couldn't help but feel the weight of the universe on her shoulders. The peaceful future she had envisioned now seemed like a dream, a distant fantasy. The reality was much darker, and humanity would have to adapt quickly if they wanted any hope of survival. Politeness was no longer enough. The Scythians had made that painfully clear. It was time for humanity to show what they were truly capable of. As the ship began its journey back to Earth, the silence in the control room was broken only by the hum of the engines. Emma stood at the helm, her thoughts swirling, trying to piece together a plan, but no clear solution emerged. The Scythians had given them a taste of what they could expect: hostility, disdain, and an unrelenting challenge to their strength. And yet there was something about the way the Scythians had spoken to her that gnawed at Emma. Their words had been harsh, their judgment cold, but there had been something else, something almost curious in their eyes. The Scythians weren't just testing humanity's strength. They were watching to see if humans could withstand their own desperation, if they could rise from the ashes of failure and fight when all seemed lost. Was that what humanity needed? Not to submit, but to rise in the face of destruction. To prove that politeness, though important, wasn't the measure of a species. As the ship closed the distance to Earth, Emma turned to face her crew once more. Her resolve had solidified into something sharp and unyielding. There was a plan forming in her mind. Though it was dangerous, uncertain, and risky, it was the only chance they had left. "We have one shot at this," she said, her voice steady. "We need to prepare for war. But we also need to show the Scythians something else, something they haven't seen before. We need to show them the strength of human will, not just our military might, but our determination to survive, to fight for our future, no matter the cost." The crew nodded, each of them understanding the weight of her words. There was no turning back now. The stakes had been set, and humanity's place in the galaxy was on the line. Back on Earth, the news of the Scythian challenge spread quickly, and the world held its breath. Governments scrambled to put together a defense, but Emma knew that no amount of weapons or ships would be enough to defeat the Scythians in their current state. Humanity's true weapon wasn't their technology. It was something far deeper. It was their unbreakable spirit, their ability to adapt, and their unwavering drive to protect their home. But even as Emma rallied her crew and Earth prepared for the worst, the question remained: would humanity's strength be enough? Would their willpower, their desire to fight for their place in the galaxy, be enough to overcome the overwhelming might of the Scythians? The answer would only come when the battle began. The tension reached its boiling point as Earth's defenses began to take shape. News of the Scythian challenge spread like wildfire, uniting humanity in a way that had never been seen before. Governments, corporations, and civilians alike put aside their differences and focused on one singular goal: survival. The hum of activity across the globe was almost deafening. Weapons were being developed at a rapid pace, fleets were being organized, and soldiers were training with fierce determination. Yet, despite the mobilization, Captain Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle wasn't going to be won on the front lines. It would be won in the hearts and minds of humanity. As the days passed, Emma couldn't help but notice a change. People who had once been apathetic toward space exploration or interstellar relations were now talking about it constantly. Children played games in the streets, pretending to pilot ships against alien invaders. News outlets, once filled with stories of politics and local issues, were now obsessed with humanity's place in the cosmos. The Scythians, though a terrifying force, had unknowingly united humanity in a way that no force or event had before. People who once scoffed at the idea of fighting for a future in space were now willing to lay down their lives for it. But as the world rallied together, Emma couldn't afford to get lost in the optimism. She knew better than anyone that the Scythians weren't simply going to roll over. They had seen humanity's politeness, and they had been unimpressed. Now, they would expect something more, something far more dangerous. In the control room of their ship, Emma stood before the vast holographic map of Earth's defensive positions. Her crew worked feverishly at their stations, monitoring communications, preparing simulations, and adjusting their tactics. The countdown was ticking. In less than a week, the Scythian fleet would arrive at Earth's orbit. The question wasn't whether humanity could defend itself. It was whether humanity could survive the first wave. The Scythians had made their expectations clear. Humanity was weak. They had no place among the stars unless they proved they were strong enough to survive the galaxy's harshest challenges. They had mocked humanity's politeness, but now they would face the raw force of human willpower. But what did that mean? Was humanity truly ready to meet the Scythians in battle? Emma didn't know if anyone could ever be ready for the kind of fight they were facing. But one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going to back down. And so, with grim determination, Captain Emma prepared her crew for what was coming. The simulations weren't perfect, but they would have to do. The humans had one advantage: resilience. They would have to use every trick, every strategy, and every ounce of their spirit to survive. The Scythians thought they were invincible, that their superiority in strength and technology made them untouchable. But Emma had learned one thing from her experiences with them: the Scythians underestimated humanity. That would be their downfall. As the days passed, more and more alien ships began to appear in Earth's orbit, silent and ominous. Their cold, metallic forms glinted in the distant light of the sun, a reminder that their strength was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Yet, despite the fear they inspired, there was a strange sense of unity growing among the people of Earth. It was as though humanity had woken up from a long sleep, and now they could see the larger picture. Their place in the universe was at stake. The final battle would not be fought with words. It wouldn't be won by politeness, kindness, or appeasement. It would be won by courage, by strength, by sheer determination to protect everything they held dear. Emma knew the odds were stacked against them, but she also knew that the Scythians had underestimated humanity's true weapon: its refusal to give up. The Scythian fleet appeared in Earth's sky on the morning of the final confrontation. Thousands of ships filled the heavens, their sleek, alien forms casting shadows over the planet below. It was a sight that should have filled any onlooker with dread. But instead, a wave of defiance surged across Earth. Humanity wasn't afraid anymore. They had seen the might of the Scythians, and they had made their decision. They were ready to fight. Captain Emma stood on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the massive fleet before her. The battle was about to begin. Her hands clenched into fists as the countdown began. It was time to show the Scythians that humanity was not as weak as they thought. Time to show them that humanity's strength wasn't in technology or power. It was in their heart. "Deploy all ships," Emma ordered, her voice cold and commanding. "We fight today for Earth, for our future." The ships of humanity surged forward, their engines roaring with life as they flew into the fray. It was a chaotic, beautiful moment. Humans, united in purpose, fought as one. As the first shots were fired, Emma felt a surge of hope. The Scythians had underestimated humanity's resilience. They thought they had come to crush them, to break them with their superior strength. But humanity wasn't so easily broken. The Scythians, for all their might, hadn't expected humanity to fight with such ferocity. They had expected submission, fear, perhaps even surrender. But what they found instead was a species that had never been afraid to fight for survival. The Scythians, so confident in their superiority, were now being forced to reconsider their assumptions. The battle raged on, with both sides suffering casualties. But humanity was no longer the weak, polite species that had first met the Scythians. They were fierce, determined, and unwilling to accept defeat. Every inch of space, every ship in the sky, was a testament to human strength. The Scythians had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. As the battle drew to a close, Captain Emma stood victorious, though the cost had been great. The Scythian fleet had been repelled, their arrogance shattered. The survivors of Earth had proven that they were no longer just a polite species. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the aftermath, the world would rebuild, but humanity had learned an invaluable lesson. Politeness alone would never secure their place in the galaxy, but their courage, their unity, and their refusal to give up, that would. The Scythians may have thought they could break humanity, but humanity had shown them that no matter how strong the enemy, no matter how insurmountable the challenge, humans would always rise. And in doing so, they had earned their place among the stars.